Now available in paperback and e-readers, Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer. Take a trip into the macabre world of goth modeling in the new millennium in this spooktacular Spinsterella story. Pick up your copy of Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. In a previous video, I talked about how Tyler Perry films were all part of what I call a struggle industrial complex. And in this video, I wanted to talk about the work that New Black Media has to do to counter-program the messages of this struggle industrial complex as related to its influence on foundational Black Americans. Now, when it comes down to this struggle industrial complex, it's a subdivision of the media arm of white supremacy, and the goal of the struggle industrial complex is an effort to program an idea in the minds of Black women to believe that their whole lives are a struggle and filled with misery, and that's all part of the mind control that the media arm of white supremacy participates in as related to trying to control the perception of what it means to be Black for both Black women and Black men regarding their media platforms. And as someone who has studied the entertainment industry for over 25 years, I can tell you that when it comes down to this type of programming, the reason why it is so influential is because there's no one there to challenge this media and challenge this media in a way that counters the ideas with actual facts. And that's where New Black Media has to take a step as we've made some progress on these platforms. Now, New Black Media has made a lot of progress over the last 15 years as many YouTubers and many on social media have talked about things as related to the issues of foundational Black Americans with our programming as related to reporting these facts as related to the anti-Black messages in mainstream media. However, now that we've gained influence over many foundational Black Americans, as we've seen as related to the 2024 presidential election, where Kamala Harris thought she was going to be able to waltz to the White House, but because Black people have stayed home, she basically wound up losing that election. Moreover, when it comes down to the recent protests that have taken place in places like Los Angeles, foundational Black Americans have stayed home, and that is all due to the influence of New Black Media as related to the content we have been presenting as related to our programming. And now what we have to do now is start counter-programming as related to the images and messages that are presented by the mainstream media and its bootlicks like Oprah Winfrey, Tyler Perry, Lee Daniels, Ice Cube, and Curtis 50 Cent Jackson Esquire. We have to start counter-programming those messages and those ideas, and that's where we start to make more progress as related to the road of Black empowerment. Now, as someone who has studied the entertainment industry for over 25 years, I learned very early when I was a teenager about counter-programming. Now, counter-programming is something that TV networks do when they're basically competing for a time slot. And what they want to do is basically try to win that time slot in order to be able to charge higher ad rates. And usually when there's a show that's on in a very strong time slot and getting good ratings, what a network does when they want to compete is they'll try to counter-program that program and counter-program that program in an effort to try to win that time slot and try to get those higher ad rates for themselves. And when it comes down to New Black Media, what we have to start doing is start looking to try to counter-program the media that's out here, try to counter-program that media, and by creating our own media. And as we counter-program, what we're looking to do is try to, one, go out here and win the influence over the black audience and black people, and to try to change the perception of black men and black women regarding our image of ourselves. That is the mission of our counter programming. Again, the counter program is designed to try to counter program this media, which is designed to be mind control, and to try to present new ideas about black people regarding ourselves, present new ideas about who we really are based on the actual facts of who we are, in an effort to try to regain influence and support of foundational black Americans, and basically try to get us to see media of ourselves that shows us as who we really are, and be something to again counter program the anti-black messages that are presented in mainstream black media by people like Oprah Winfrey, Tyler Perry, Lee Daniels, your Ice Cubes, your Curtis 50 Cent Jackson Esquires. Again, this cabal of black people basically are controlling the black part of the media arm of white supremacy, and what they want to do is present the images that they find to be that they believe will allow them to, one, not only gain influence with their white backers and media studios, but also go out here and present the anti-black narratives and stereotypes that make those white people feel comfortable about black people. And what they want to do is, again, continue to give you many of the movies in the struggle industrial complex that show you the abused black women. Not to mention, they want to give you the slave movies that just come up every year, or the media that basically, again, denigrates our history, whether it be that Harriet movie or that Bass Reeves television series. It's all about programming ideas in your head, programming ideas in your head that fit right in line with the institution of white supremacy. And when it comes down to the institution of white supremacy, again, their whole media is about mind control and programming an idea in black people to believe that they are inferior and that they have no sense of self-worth, and that everything that they do in this world will turn into failure. That's what this media is all about, programming in the minds of black people in an effort to go out here and create a self-fulfilling prophecy in the minds of black people that makes white supremacy's world smooth, because when they believe that if black people see black people failing in life, they will go out here and imitate this because they believe this is the norm for black people. And this is all about, again, programming black people, again, to be their own worst enemy. And that's why I agree with Professor Black Truth when he talks about how this media is mind control. Again, it's all about controlling your perception of self. And this all starts out at an early age when your children are in these public schools and they show you books in the black literary canon like those of the late Richard Wright and many others. Again, this is all about programming ideas regarding your perception of self, and this has gone on ever since the days of slavery. Again, the caricatures that they made, like the Brute and the Mammy, were all about presenting an idea of black people being inferior and less than, and that allows white supremacy to have black people looking at white people as superior instead of seeing our own potential to be great as related to who we really are. And that's why, again, New Black Media's next step as related to things is not only going out here as related to educating black people about the political process, but we have to counter-program this media by presenting our own media on our own platforms regarding our own image. And that's what many of our ancestors did in the 20th century. Men like Oscar Micheaux, when he learned how to make films, he would counter-program this media that was presented in many of the mainstream films that showed black people as brutes, black people basically being violent and criminals in many films like those Little Rascals films and many of these other films where, yes, they would have a black character, but the character would either be a mammy, or the character would be a minstrel, or they would be again, a punchline of a joke. You would have people like Oscar Micheaux coming out here with films to counter program that message for black audiences. And those black filmmakers back then, again, looked to counter program by showing the balanced and humanized picture of foundational black Americans. And then you also had publishers like the late John H. Johnson of Johnson Publications, who made Ebony, Jet, Hue, and Tan magazines. Again, this was also counter-programming the anti-black messages in mainstream media that did not want to see images of black success, did not want to see images of black beauty, did not want to see black people, again, as we really were. And this business of Johnson Publications also went out here and made businesses like the Ebony Fashion Fair, which was a fashion show, again, designed to give a stage to black designers during Jim Crow, and was going on for many decades after that. Again, this was all part of the counter programming that we needed in our community. And again, a lot of our people did support that type of media because they understood how important it is to have control over our image and control over our stories and our narrative, because we could not trust the mainstream media to go out here and have their state-sponsored bootlicks putting up their messages, because their messages were not about showing a positive image of black people. No, their whole message in their media was about programming the idea that yes, you could have colored people on a screen, you could have colored people in movies and TV, but they always had to fail, or they always had to be seen as second best. And again, this is what was taught to many foundational black Americans who invested heavily in that media, or as Professor Black Truth has said, many people have oversampled. Again, they didn't know that they were being programmed with an idea in their minds that they were to see themselves as inferior, see themselves as second best, and not see their perspective of self as being where they can see themselves first. And that's something many black people never really think about as related to this media that is presented by these mainstream platforms. And again, this is something that has to be counter-programmed because, again, when you look at media that shows you in a different light, it changes your perception of self and changes your idea of self to see the value in being black, to see the worth in being black, to see that black has a value to God and a value to you. That's something that counter-programming is desperately needed as related to our media. Now, that's what people like Bill Cosby were trying to do back in the 1970s when he went out here and supported the late Melvin Van Peebles as related to opening up the doors for black people in Hollywood. Bill Cosby was working behind the scenes to, again, open those doors so that we could go out here and have films on these mainstream platforms. He made an effort to try to open the door so that we could go out here and start telling stories about ourselves and be able to have control over those stories. And as he opened the door, other filmmakers like Robert Townsend and Spike Lee were telling those stories in the 1980s. And that basically, again, changed the entire perception of self of young black boys like myself. Now, back in the 80s, a lot of people they took the shows like The Cosby Show for granted. However, that show basically, again, shaped the way I started to see myself, because that counter-programming basically showed me a balanced message compared to that of what my brother got in the 70s with the blaxploitation films. Now, the blaxploitation films, again, they basically were giving you this hyper-masculine black man, but Bill Cosby gave us a balanced picture. Same thing with Robert Townsend and early Spike Lee films. Again, this counter-programming basically changed a lot of the perceptions of young black boys during that time, and the whole advent of rap music when it was controlled by foundational black American men, again, changed our perception of self. And seeing those images and seeing that media of balanced, humanized black people, that basically, again, had a major impact in as I say, counter-programming the anti-black messages that kids like myself saw in public schools with people who were in the literary canon, like a Richard Wright, who basically just wrote stories about black failure, and stories like A Raisin in the Sun and The Color Purple. Again, these were anti-black messages, but you did have counter-programming messages. Moreover, as we came into the 90s, you had people like the late, great Dwayne McDuffie coming out with Milestone Comics. All of this basically, again, transformed an entire generation of black men and women who right now, again, how we saw ourselves as boys and girls, how we saw ourselves. And again, counter-programming can, again, have a major impact on people's perception of self. And that's the next step that New Black Media has to take as related to media. It has to take that next step as related to media, because you don't really need a lot of money to go out here and counter-program media. No, you just have to have a message that you want to present regarding the image of black people, a perception of black people in your media. Again, this is something that has been missing from black media, again, as related to things, because we have to do more than tell people about the anti-black racism that goes on in mainstream media with stuff like this, the struggle industrial complex. Now we also have to counter-program it, because what you're doing when you counter-program is offer the black audience something different. You offer the black audience something different to show them a tangible picture of themselves and tangible stories that show black people who we really are. This is what you're offering to the black audience, and it's extremely important, because when you go out here and you present that image, what you're doing is, again, taking control of the black image. Now, a lot of people say it's impossible to take control of the black image, but as I've heard from guys like Professor Black Truth and Jason Black, again, this doesn't take a lot of money to do. No, you just have to go out here and put in the effort to go out here and put your media out here. And it's a lot easier today than it was almost 40 years ago when I wanted to be a writer back when I was 9 years old, and even easier than it was in the year 2000 when I wanted to do my first book. Back then it would cost $20,000 to do a book and cost thousands more or even millions more to make a film. However, these days, again, with the advent of iPhones, with the advent of print-on-demand technology, any creator can go out here and work towards counter-programming the mainstream black media with new black media that basically falls in line with the media of our ancestors, like the late Oscar Micheaux, Melvin Van Peebles, Bill Cosby, and many others who went to counter-program the mainstream ideas about black people, counter-program those ideas. Again, the counter-programming is about offering up a image or a story that shows foundational black Americans, a more balanced picture of black people, a counter message that shatters all these stereotypes and ideas that many of these racists present as related to the image of black people to be their whole idea of reality, because what they want to do is, again, shape our reality, try to play God with our lives, and tell us how to be black, like what I saw in the Robert Townsend movie Hollywood Shuffle, where they had a whole skit talking about the black acting school. They had this entire skit talking about how to talk and act black, and that flew over my head when I was a teenager. But as I grew older, I started to understand what they were doing was looking to tell you how to be black, because that's all part of programming a spellbound mindset into black people, where they become influenced to become the kind of black people that look to fit themselves into a black box that's acceptable to white people, and not look to be themselves and look to conform to that whole standard, but never really learn who they really are. that's what's the big problem with a lot of black people. Again, we don't see how influential this media is in that it's trying to tell us who we are instead of us trying to find out who we really are, and also look back at our history and see who we used to be. I mean, that's something I went in depth on in one of my novels, Spellbound. In my novel, Spellbound, I talk about the spellbound mindset and this quest for white acceptance as related to the mind control that's over black people, and how in a neighborhood like Sugar Hill, again, a neighborhood built by foundational black Americans to be considered to be one of the best neighborhoods black people ever had. Again, this neighborhood was built not just by jazz musicians, but by Pullman porters and maids who basically worked to buy their own brownstones. And they built an entire neighborhood that was very successful. However, as black people looked to gain white acceptance during the civil rights movement, they basically abandoned that neighborhood and abandoned a neighborhood that we built to try to live in the suburbs with white people instead of valuing and appreciating our own black community, because we got spellbound during the civil rights movement looking for white acceptance. And again, that was all due to us and our need to, again, be programmed to believe white is better and white acceptance is better. But we have to come out of that mindset, break that spell over our minds. And again, that's what counter-programming is all about. Counter-programming is all about presenting the message that black people, again, we are not inferior. We do not need to go to the white person to get better. No, we can go out here and make something of a standard that's the same as a white person's, and or even exceed their standard, because that's what our athletes have done, gone out here and exceeded that standard. Many of our filmmakers have exceeded that standard, and we start to see that now with guys like Ryan Coogler with films like Sinners, again, taking things to the next level with his fantasy and science fiction. Again, we can go out here and again, we have to again start counter-programming, because counter-programming is again about changing our perception of self, where instead of us talking about failure, we start talking about seeing ourselves in a mindset of success. And that's what we have. That's why I want to push back against the struggle industrial complex, because the struggle industrial complex has you in a place of seeing yourself as inferior. And again, that's what white supremacy loves Tyler Perry, because it's all about mind control and keeping black people in a perception of self where they see themselves as inferior and see themselves at the bottom of the world. And as we see ourselves at the bottom of the world, we start to think, oh, there's nothing but failure and nothing but misery as related to life. And that's not the life that God wants you to have. No, God wants black people to live an abundant life. He wants black people to grow and prosper. He wants black people to, again, achieve and succeed. But we have to get out of the whole mindset of buying into mainstream media's idea of us. And again, this is where new black media has to step in. New black media has to step in and start working on pushing back against the struggle industrial complex. That's something I have been doing here with the SJS Direct imprint for the last 15 years, pushing back as related to the mainstream media's idea of self, because I knew back when I was 18 years old, I remember watching, again, Boys in the Hood, an Oprah Winfrey promo for it where she had Ice Cube on the show, and I looked at it and I said, you know, this is what I see the images of black people about to make a bad turn. And I remember back then saying I want to create positive stories about black people because I saw where things were going. I saw on that Oprah show that we were headed towards a bad road, and that's when we got the era of the Hood movie. That's where we got the return of the Black Jezebel with women like Little Kim and Foxy Brown. And after that, we got the mainstreaming of dysfunction as a norm as related to black images. We went from Claire Huxtable to Letitia Musgrove in Monsters Ball, and ever since Halle Berry and Denzel Washington won the Oscars in 2001, the black community's whole perception of self has gone from us looking to aspire to be the best and aspire for success to us looking to be in the hood and look to be in the streets. And instead of us seeing that larger picture of black life, and people being programmed to see a world that is larger of black people, we have our world condensed back into a ghetto of poor, miserable black people. Poor, miserable black people who live in an endless cycle of abuse and violence. That's what is presented to us as media, as people watch stuff not only like Tyler Perry movies, but to watch stuff like Oprah Winfrey Presents, with stuff like The Wedding, and even before that, Women of Brewster Place and Alice Walker's The Color Purple. And that's why I call it a struggle industrial complex, because it's a cabal of individuals who dedicate themselves to promoting anti-black messages, and this is where new black media has to come in and start counter-programming this type of media, counter-programming this media, because this is about influencing our image of self and how we see ourselves, because we have to go out. If we want to talk about empowerment, part of taking our power is taking control of the media that we watch, we read, and we see as related to ourselves, and taking control of that media by going out here and finding an alternative. That's what I try to provide here on the SJS Direct imprint. I try to offer an alternative to foundational black Americans. Now, I've always said, again, SJS Direct books are for everyone, but my mission, again, was to show a richer picture of black life to the entire world, show a richer picture of black life, to show, one, that black people are human, two, there's a more balanced picture of black people versus what you see in a Tyler Perry or Oprah Winfrey or one of these other people's films, where you see, oh, black women being abused, black man being a violent brute. No, I dig deeper and show you, okay, what motivates a person as related to why they're doing what they do. Moreover, I show accountability for actions, something you don't see in a Tyler Perry film. So I try to come at stories from a more objective perspective and showing you, okay, this character, why they did this, and they have to take accountability for their actions. Whereas with Tyler Perry, you just see abused black woman, and you never see her having to deal with her choices like in many of his films, or even Oprah Winfrey films or Lee Daniels films. They just show you the abused black woman and the super brute black man that fits right in line with white supremacy's narrative as related to the dysfunction in the black community, but they don't show you the balanced picture or show you functional black people who basically, again, deal with the struggles of life, or show you, again, a larger world of black people. You don't get to see that in mainstream black media, but in new black media, we have a responsibility to not only talk to people about the problems in mainstream media, but we have to counter-program those ideas. Again, you have to offer something different if you want people's perception to change and help black people to take power over our image. In order for us to take power over our image, we have to counter-program the anti-black messages that are presented in mainstream media. It's not, for me, it's not just enough to talk about this media, but to counter-program it and challenge it and push back against it. Push back against it, because in order for black people's perception of self to change, you have to offer black people something different. And when you offer people something different, it can transform people's lives. Like I had one viewer who went out here and they bought some of my books and gave them to their kids. And he told me that his kids, basically their perception of self started to change because they started to read a story where they saw a black character, again, being the center of that world. They started to see a character who basically had a positive image of self. And as they read that story, it changed their kids' views as related to things. And that shows me, again, how impactful counter-programming can be as related to things. Because when you read stories where you see, one, you're the center of the world, two, you see a story revolving around you and no white validation at all, it says that you are basically not seeking out any sort of person for power, but you're going out here going for things for yourself. And three, you're going out here You're reading stories where you win, which is something very important for foundational Black Americans, because in order to get a winner's mindset, you have to see yourself winning in stories, because that's what white kids do when they watch cartoons all the time. They see the white characters always winning, and it's time for Black people to start seeing stories where we're out here winning on the regular. And if you give your kids this at an early age, again, it builds up their self-esteem, builds up their self-confidence, helps them develop a sense of self-worth. That's what, again, New Black Media has to start working on as related to counter-programming, because counter-programming is, again, about changing the perception of Black people in our own minds regarding ourselves. Again, yes, we do have a lot of work to do, again, informing the brothers and sisters of what's going on, but we also have to work on counter-programming. Again, counter-programming is important because we have to counter-program these anti-Black messages. I mean, because your kids are getting this all the time. You're getting this all the time, and you have to counter-program this stuff, counter-program it so that you don't, again, wind up being affected by it. And that's one of the reasons why I turned off a lot of mainstream media, because I know that it always presented Black people as failures, Black people as losing, Black people never really accomplishing anything outside of being bootlicks and sellouts. But when the thing we have to do, again, is on New Black Media, go out here and counter-program things. And again, that's what I try to do with my books, with my books like the ISIS series, the Steam series, the John Haynes series, books like the Spinsterella books, and other books like Eternal Night, counter-program these messages. And again, I want to program the idea in Black people's minds that, one, you are front and center of your world. 2, you are somebody important. 3, you're that there are ways for you to go out here and have success and win. I want you to, again, start getting that frame of thinking, because in order for us to go and create that Black agenda, we have to start adopting a winner's mindset. And again, a winner's mindset is about working towards winning and having the idea, again, of focusing on working on goals towards success. And again, that winner's mindset is something we've got to start developing. And again, that we can't develop that without counter-programming, because to tell me that, again, we have New Black Media, again, New Black Media is all about, again, not just telling people about, again, what's going on, but looking to counter-program what is presented, counter-program a Tyler Perry. Now, I don't have $1 billion, and yet you don't really even need $1 billion. Again, you just need to have a message that you want to put out there. And again, you have to have stories that show, again, that larger picture of Black life. And again, I believe if you go out here and build a better story, and anybody can build a better story, I have built better stories than Tyler Perry, we can push back against this struggle industrial complex. Now, it may be a challenge to gain the influence over Black people. That's what I ran into with one viewer as related to Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer. They couldn't even believe that Black girls could be soft and feminine. And again, it shows how deep the influence of this media is on the Black mind. But you have to keep going out here and looking to counter program, because we are making inroads. We are having an impact. And again, the next step for New Black Media is counter-programming the mainstream media, counter-programming many of these anti-Black messages, like the way Bill Cosby did, and continuing to build on the legacy of men like Bill Cosby and Robert Townsend and many others who wanted to go out here when they first came out here to, again, elevate the Black image, change the stories about Black people to show us stories of success, and show us that success is not a white thing. Success is Black, and it can, and the whole thing is we can have success if we take power over ourselves, power over our image, and we can gain the victory in life by going out here and, again, taking control over things, take control over our stories, and, again, show the world the real story of Black people and not the stereotypes and caricatures that white supremacy wants to present regarding us. We can go out here and change our story, because if once you counter-program these stories that are out here that are considered the mainstream canon, we can go out here and tell our stories and show people the truth about what it means to be Black, and tell the true story about the Black experience. Now, if you want to check out many of my books on the SJS Direct imprint that present you a more balanced picture and richer picture and more diverse picture of Black life, you can pick up those books in paperback and Kindle format on Amazon.com, and you can also find them at other online booksellers like Draft the Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you want to see me continue to be able to make content that will counter-program many of the messages in the struggle industrial complex, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, A Thorn in My Side. The man who rules the world takes on an agent from the CIA from the Black Boule in this all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes' A Thorn in My Side in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Now available on Lulu, John Haynes at Death's Door. The man who rules the world takes on the Greek god of death in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes comic book. Get your copy of the first John Haynes comic at Lulu.com today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Esteemed Season of the Witch Girl. The aspiring angel takes on a wicked teenage witch in this action-packed, all-new Esteemed series adventure. Pick up your copy of Esteemed Season of the Witch Girl in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.